Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Alexander Nagiu and I'm part of the beta team. I'm honored to be here tonight with you, and I would like to present you the jurors of the text category that will have a conference tonight. I will firstly introduce Ana Maria Zahariade. I don't think she needs an introduction, but I'll read a small one, a short one. Ana Maria Zahariade is an architect, theorist, and professor of architectural theory at the University of Architecture and Urbanism, Ion Mincu. Known for her research on Romanian and Central European modernism, post-communist architecture, housing and housing policies, Ana Maria Zahariade has published several reference books, including Architecture in the Communist Project, Romania 1944-1989, a detailed study of the influence of the communist regime on the Romanian architecture, and Horia Creangă, a monography, which explores the life and work of an important Romanian modernist architect. International acknowledgement of her work came in 2003 when she was awarded the Herder Prize in recognition of her theoretical contributions and cultural activism. Now, I invite Ana Maria Zahariade to present us her work.
Thank you, Alex. It was very unfair to read this because I'm going to speak about the same thing, because you told me that I have to present myself, and I had no other idea. So I'm very happy to be here and honored. I'm less happy for being so invited to speak about me, because I don't like to speak about me. So I try to be as brief as possible. Should I press the button? This one? Oh, no, I want to be back. I want just basic. Well, and so they asked me to have a sort of CV, I don't know, and this is really boring, so I gave the CV, let's say, a more intellectual and a more profound signification, using this sentence by Ortega y Gasset, because we are all this, in fact, and all we are depends very much on our circumstances. That's why I'm trying to point out some moments in my life, in my intellectual life, let's say in my professional life. I will also try to highlight a little my connections to Timișoara, which are quite long, I realized when putting this. And of course I won't speak about some details concerning them. Maybe we can speak about after when we discuss together. So these are some circumstances. Probably you recognize there Ionica Andreescu. And the last one is the beta of 2018, isn't it? And there I was a student. So let's say these are some circumstances in which I was involved, some professional circumstances, and of course, I had to just to honor you. I tried to imitate a little the graphic design of your site. So this is how I played with this. Let's say my professional EO started as a student, but as you have seen the previous photo. And I finished the school with a diploma, which is my first link to Timișoara, because the subject, the theme was a philharmonic hall in Timișoara. And I had to excuse myself to have wanted to endow your city with this horrible building, but this was, at the time I fell in love with Sharon and with the Philharmonic Hall. Well, that's why it was never built. You are happy for this. It was just in the middle of the city, in the place behind the Continental Hotel, a park today, happily, but it was meant at the time to be a civic center of Timisoara. Well, happily, it's still a park. I don't know the intention now. Anyway, after this designing Philharmonic Hall helped me to go to design industrial buildings at an institute in Bucharest. So this lasted in 77 when and this was a very important moment, I re-entered the school as assistant of Mircea Alifantis, Professor Mircea Alifantis' studio. And he played a very important role for me and in my evolution, let's say. And in 2014 I had a conference here on his presence. It was on the occasion of the Beta Cult present, isn't it? Well, and after this, for all us, 1989 represented the moment, the new birth, because this was for me a new birth, and a new change in my professional life, because in 1991 I changed from the design studios in the school to the chair of theory of architecture, the theory and history of architecture, and I was in charge with reviving the theory of architecture, which is totally lost in our school, whatever theory of architecture means. But I tried to do this. And I had a lot of courses. I had a lot of work. I always felt as a student who did not read enough for an exam. This was a permanent feeling I had. And in 1992, I tried also to do some designs, and it was very interesting. It was a perfume store. It was splendid. But I realized that I have to choose. And finally, I choose theory and continue the work at the chair. And this was the year of my first book, which was this one. I put a heart on the books I loved the most, I'm most attached. And this was a book written and published in heroic condition that nobody would accept today, but it was splendid. And after this, Marcelliano was already better, and some other conditions, and finally Horia Kranger was not re-edited, was rewritten in a luxury, quite recently in a luxury edition, a splendid edition, but the first one remains my love, although this one is much better. And I owe this to my colleague and friend Nicolae Lascu, who had the idea of the Centennial exhibition Horia Lang, and it was an exhibition, and the exhibition was the first exhibition ever done for a Romanian architect, so and dedicated to a Romanian architect, and the catalog was the first modern catalog of an exhibition. So it was a moment, a fantastic moment, because a lot of things deserved to be built, and we had to work for this, to build them, to work hard to build them. We had somehow the feeling of discovery, or an adventurer. Well, sorry. I don't know. Well, no. I don't know how to do it. Well, so if I must go back. But after this, another book I love immensely, and which is connected to Timișoara, was a catalogue of the Romanian pavilion at the Biennale, at the 1996 Biennale di Venezia, where it was Forgotten Balance about Timișoara. We have a photograph there. And the catalogue, it is again one of the books I love the most. And after this, I had the next, the Rebuild Architecture, Rebuild the City, which was in 2000, for the same Biennale. But this one was absolutely fantastic, and from this moment on, a lot of friendship, deep friendship, connect me with people in Timișoara. Well, doesn't matter. Another topic which was interesting from my point of view, and for which I made some researches and I wrote, was the architecture, Romanian architecture under communism, and this started in 2002 with Dacia 1300, My Generation, which was an exhibition in Stockholm, in Perth, and accompanied by a book, which is written by Tom Sandquist and by myself. And then this continued to obsess me, and I had a lot of articles that I gathered, I put together in this red book. Well, of course, where is Romanian architecture going was another topic. And I put here some of the books, but I had a lot of articles and conferences concerning this matter. And well, these are the symptoms of transition, exactly what they say. While this ACUM was a collective project, still possible, still readable, in my opinion, and I found a lot of students to use it at documentation. Anyway, it prepared me. It prepared me for, let's say, the present endeavor I'll talk you about. Meanwhile, I had a moment of, let's say, I tried to enter in another period and in another moment, and this was going back to the past. It was in search for some roots of the theory of the aesthetic concepts in architecture, because I felt that this is a topic not spoken, not discussed, but which will be discussed, it must be discussed. So it is not finished, it will come, but it was something that from time to time made me dream and go back in the node theory, and it is something, a very special feeling. But for the moment, my important work is along with my younger colleagues and friends, Radu Ponta, Celiagica, Miruna Stroje, Irina, Daniela Calciu, and my God, I think I didn't forget one of them. Together, we founded this annual architectural magazine. You can find it on this site. It is, you can download any of the articles. This is a very serious international magazine, and we are already at the 13th issue. And my idea is to invite you to contribute, because from today on, the call for paper is put on the site. Anyway, I send you, a lot of you to the school also, the invitation with the call for papers, and you see it is possible until the 9th December. So, this is what I want to tell you. Contribute to this culture of texts in architecture, because texts are important. But I hope that we discuss this when we discuss together. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now I will present the next speaker, which is Alexander Bede. Alexander Bede is an architect, researcher, curator, author, and editor from Novi Sad, Serbia. He studied architecture and urbanism at University of Novi Sad and earned his PhD degree in urbanism at UAV, Venice, Italy. He dedicated much of his career to research of history of 20th century architecture and urbanism, and published books on modernist topics in Serbia and Germany. His professional interests have recently expanded out of classical architecture, and he was a fellow at the CCA 2023 Summer School in Classical Architecture at University of Cambridge, UK, and Engelsberg, Sweden. Now I will invite Alexander to present us.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Let me just figure out. My idea for tonight was basically to justify what qualifies me to be in the jury for this category. So I will just run through everything I've ever written, published, but also actually, more importantly, I wanted to emphasize what is my connection to Timisoara, because I had one very special video lecture dedicated to Timisoara from a couple of years ago. I'm an editor of the Tanz magazine. There's a magazine that's published by the Association of Architects of Novi Sad, that's the city I'm from. That's the only magazine that survives today from, that corpus of architecture magazines that were published by local associations of architects. In Yugoslavia, until the 1990s, like every city had Association of Architects, and each association published their magazine. Well, this is the only one in Serbia, Croatia, and so on that still exists with continuity, and I really enjoy editing it. It's in Serbian language. It concerns local topics, but we try always to put English summaries in the back. It's my dear last edition, which also has a special issue in it dedicated to Banat, and it also covers some of the topics here done by, for example, you know very well, maybe the work of Bogdan Dimitrescu and his group of students dedicated to little locations along the Vega Canal, and it's adaptive reuse with the students. Yeah, by the way, all of my PDFs and whatever I published and work and everything that is free, you can find on my Linktree, either through QR code or just when you search for my name, just go to my Linktree, and I try to use it like, instead of LinkedIn, which is, yeah, no thanks. Linktree is it. I did my also a gig in terms of history of modern architecture since student days. Basically, this is a collage of a book that I published almost 10 years ago, dedicated to a couple of architects from Novi Sad whose opus I discovered, and they designed really nice things in 1950s, 60s, and then they moved to Stuttgart in 1963. And then I was an artist in residence in Stuttgart in 2013, and when I went there, she was still alive, and then I went to meet her, Milena Georgievich. And yeah, so talking to her, then I researched everything they did in Yugoslavia, they did in Germany, and that's how I published the book. And that's how I just realized I didn't put the cover of the book in the slide. But that's how I started researching the generation of architects in the 50s, 60s by seeking them out personally while they are still alive and running up to them with speaker recorder and researching the archives. And that's mostly what I've been doing for the last 10 years. So years and years of archive, of research in archives, and this is, for example, another book. This is now the 80s with my colleagues. We had this mega structure in Novi Sad that we finally theoretically, let's say, analyzed and researched and published, and I guess it was up to my generation of architects to finally pay theoretical attention to structures like this. This is a multifunctional sports venue, public venue, cultural venue center in the city. It's called Spence, and so on in terms of my modernist architecture research. It came to the point when in the local city archives, I discovered 350 boxes of projects of designs from 1950s, 60s. The archive never made a list of what's in the boxes. So I spent like 2 years opening 350 boxes in the archive, and went through thousands and thousands of designs from the 50s, 60s, and making an Excel sheet. And finally, when you go to the archive, you press Ctrl F, and you can search it by names of the authors and other locations and everything. If you have to go to Novi Sad City Archive, that's thanks to me. They should research it. But I guess there was a consequence to my psyche when I went through years and years and thousands of projects of modernist designs. Something happened, and I switched to classicism a couple of years ago. I guess I realized I couldn't call myself an architect if I don't know the proportions of Doric, Ionic, Corinthian style and how to design. I realized it's a tool set that's meant to be used in design, and we are not using it. We are not taught at school how to use it for at least I don't know, almost 100 years, we learn about classicism as history of architecture, but it's meant to be a tool set to design. So I went to Cambridge to pursue the education because it doesn't exist anywhere in Europe. On the right is a little bit of Palladio exercise, and on the left is my first classical design from scratch for Cambridge. And by the way, I learned a new technique that's architectural watercolor, which is amazing. But now I do everything. Modernism looks amazing in watercolor, so I highly recommend it. It's just a technical drawing in pencil, and then you just take watercolors, and this is the result. Another one of research is the heritage of great projects of territorial modernization of Vojvodina, which is a region of northern Serbia, to which Banat also belongs. The Serbian half of Banat, and it's pretty much the same history and everything as this half of Banat. And the biggest project of territorial modernization in Vojvodina is the canal network between the rivers Danube, Tisa, and so on. It's such a formative and amazing heritage that we have that you can write the whole history of the region, starting from the canals and everything that they enabled, the livability, the habitability of the territory, the productability of the territory, the settlements, the networks of cities and towns, and so on and so on. I published a really cool research scientific paper about the narratives of the canal's buildings. So go to my link tree to read it. And discovered again very, very nice historical drawings. While I was researching it, the concept for the canals from the 1940s. For example, I discovered that they built some kind of model of the canal network at the Novi Sad Agriculture Fair in 1954 in a room like this. And we have some cool photos about that. And this is where I wanted to connect with Timișoara. I guess my interest in this topic in the canals got me connected with the crew from this school, with Bogdan and Tresco, of course, and with their cool project, Eclusa Pedega, which means box on the Vega Canal. For the last 2 or 3 years, there will be a series of what? Of public events which wanted to bring back focus to the possibility of reinvention and reuse of the Vega Canal, which connects to the canal network in Serbia, and which was the connection was neglected for decades because of border and so on and everything else. So they did stuff like this. Bogdan and his crew, you see, trying to remap, research the region with for example, these are the 6 locks on the Vega River. I mean, river canal. It's a channelized river, actually. That was cut through historically in 1918 with a new border between, at the time, Romania and Yugoslavia. With all the problems that the new border brought into what was once unique one organism, let's say, the canal network. So from the point of view of Timișoara, the main instrument of rediscovery of the Vega Canal was, of course, the Pelican boat. I guess you are all very familiar with it. It's the result of a cool collaboration between architects and Kafeldag, who bought the boat, and they reconstructed the boat and started using it not only as an event space, event venue, but a cultural venue, like floating cultural platform. And 2 years ago, okay, this is last year, for example, we had a workshop with students of architecture from Serbia and from Romania. And 2 years ago, they invited me to give a lecture on one of those boat rides, are they called rides? Boat say, right? To the through locks and back, downstream and upstream from Timișoara. So there were a series of lectures, and I prepared this lecture. I wanted to come up with a new narrative for Timișoara, for Banat, reoriented towards water and towards using the canal. So I just wanted to briefly revisit this lecture after 2 years now. I named it West Coast Banat, planning towards the sunset with the stock photos from, I don't know where, some tropical region. But this was my case. There exists an internal European ocean, an ocean in Europe. It consists of this network of rivers and canals, and you can sail, go by boat along this ocean endlessly. Danube and all the other rivers that connect it in both directions, all the way to Netherlands, to France, to wherever you want. You can go by boat. You can go to actual oceans like Atlantic Ocean. You can go to Mediterranean, and so on. And Timișoara is placed like on an appendix of this ocean. That's the Vega Canal. I think it was historically cut from the possibility of flow of sailing out into the ocean because of the border, because there didn't exist border crossing for boats on the canal when you go from Romania to Serbia. And this made me realize that this has a potential for reimagining the identity of Banat and of Timișoara, to turn the things upside down. Okay, we are here, we're on this appendix, west of we're in the western part of the country, on this edge of this corner, but when we look towards the sunset, towards where the canal goes, this I realized actually is that the Serbian border is actually the ocean horizon. You can just look at it at the Serbian border, but you cannot sail out, flow out. And I realized, okay, here in Timișoara, we could reinvent ourselves as the west coast of Romania, because this is the westernmost edge of the country on the beginning of this inter-European ocean, and just behind the border lies immediately this enormous network of canals and rivers in Serbia, where you can sail around endlessly. So, I realized when I stand in Timișoara on a bridge looking down the Vega towards the horizon, it's something like this. So this is the idea of West Coast, but it's not only this. It's this, it's not stereotype, but what the term of West Coast means in popular imagination, like California. This is like the place where you finally go westmost in the United States and you reach the ocean, like the ultimate freedom and the sunset, and you can finally sail into it, and it's the land of absolute freedom, total freedom. So why not use this idea of absolute freedom also here, freedom to sail out towards the sunset, sail out across the Serbian border. And what happens when you sail out, when you ride the boat across the border? You come into a nautical culture in Serbia, at least because of this canal network. We have a really strong nautical culture. Everyone has boats, and there's regattas, and there's this culture of leisure and people having vacations and fun on their boats and driving around. So this is the ocean I'm talking about, just behind the border. If you had the boat here, you would join this, for example, regatta with your friends and with party boats. This is Vega, just behind the border, by the way, in Zrenjanin. You can go to the locks and have stops and overnights. This is the party boat, and you can make barbecue and so on and so on. This is the ocean that lies behind the border that I'm talking about. And something else that lies behind the border is this nature reserve along the Bega. It's called Tsarska Bara, just near Zrenjanin. It's the last remaining part of something that I realized is we could call Banat European Amazon. European Amazon because this region was once in history before the canal network. It was really a landscape of territory of endless water and endless forests and marshlands. It was not really passable for humans, and it took a lot of historical effort to drain this territory and to make it habitable. And the last remaining piece of this once existing European Amazon is this nature reserve called Tsarska Bara. In Serbia, you can even go there and ride this boat. So I started making this connection. Okay, it's not just West Coast, it's also Amazon, Bega, Banat. Tropical identity, perfect. So we need to, in Banat and in Vojvodina, to reclaim our tropical identity also, because we had somewhat of a similar landscape and natural conditions. So if you, from the Ushvara to canals, if you sail down even more into the Danube River, then we're starting really to talk tropical, because you start encountering wonderful river islands like this, when you can dock with your boat in a mangrove almost forest. So if I say we use a tropical identity here, am I exaggerating? I think this pictures like this say that maybe it's not such a stretch. And for example, at least for us in Novi Sad, this identity living on the water is really, really important, and people use it all the time. And there is one more argument that I realized for my thesis of West Coast, of sunsets, of tropical, for Banat. I realized each small city, each small town in Serbian half of Banat always has its body of water on the west side of the city. Lakes, rivers, canals, I mean always, usually. So you always are in a situation to go after work to some beach, to some body of water, and watch the sunset above water. Because it's always on the west side. So we have Bela Crkva, Visarika, Alba, with these lovely lakes, and this is where people go to watch the sunset over the water. So this is the local west coast. In Zrenjanin, you have similar lakes on the western side of the city, Peskara. So this is the local west coast. In Pančevo, the river and this beach is again on the west side of the city, and this is their west coast, where people go to watch the sunset above water, and so on. Whichever city, Novi actually has the best sunset in Banat on the Tisa River, Elemir, and so on and so on. This is a whole other lecture. I'll try to say it in 10 seconds. You can even make a case for a city like Kikinda, that's in another city in Serbia, Banat. You can construct its entire urban planning identity, starting from one palm tree and finishing at the sunset, because it turned out that all the most important identity building urban spaces in the city all outflow towards the west, towards the sunset. So number one is where we starting from. It's this tiny, small courtyard cafe in the city center. It has palm trees. So the most intimate space in the city from the palm tree. If we start walking from there towards west, step out from the cafe, we go to bigger and bigger spaces like the city center and towards the west expanding into even more recognizable typical urban planning settlements from 1960s, 70s, 80s. You can explain the history of Kikinda just walking westwards from this palm tree through these more and more open spaces, and you end up on the western side in green as the cabins and vacation halls on the canal, and we end up on the canal, which is on the west part of the city, and this is where citizens go out to seek their tropical sunset when they start walking from the palm tree to the canal. And I just wanted now to maybe explain personally what made me personally go into this direction of seeking non-architectural, non-technical notions in explaining my concepts, which is a personal story. The whole business of COVID lockdowns since 2020, I took it really hard, really personally, that somebody was suppressing my freedom, like this, that I couldn't go somewhere, and I will never forget that. It made me start fantasizing about, breaking out, going outside, going across the border, breaking these stupid rules, and this wish of where I would like to go. I made it tropical freedom, whatever that is. For me, tropical freedom was simply this freedom to go wherever you want when you want it. And this is what it looked like for me in my mind. I had two choices, like to obey what the epidemiologists say, or to just ignore it and run away from people, from civilization, from this prison. And I came across the Abercrombie and Fitch ad campaign from 1990s that famously has these images of tropical freedom, and I realized while preparing this lecture for Timișoara, for the West Coast Banat, for the Poles 2 years ago, this is the imagery for West Coast Banat, because this is how young people should reclaim not only their freedom, but should reclaim urban planning and, smash the table and say, listen, urban planners, we need to regenerate the Vega Canal in Timișoara in the west side of the city and downstream from the city, because it's been neglected, and this is the territory through which we can, by dominating with our bodies, through which we can reclaim the sunset and flowing out into the sunset and sailing out into the internal European ocean. And I came up with a campaign thanks to Abercrombie and Fitch. So this is how young citizens of Timișoara break through urban planning rules and neglect of the Vega Canal and start gathering in Josephine and with their surfboards, and little by little. So these are villages all downstream from Timișoara, for those who don't know. Little by little reconquering the territory that belongs to those who appreciate the sunset. And this is where we reach the horizon, this is the border, and you break through the border, and you're in the internal European ocean. And this is how you, young citizens of Timișoara, reclaim the internal European ocean by breaking through all the rules. Wouldn't you know, somebody did that a year later. There is a crew, Secum Europa from Timișoara, who, I don't know who they are, they have a boat, and they decided, because there was this short, first time ever, first time in 50 years, last year, there was the opportunity for the border to be open for the boats, and these guys used it, and they sailed out from Timisoara to Tenerife, to Black Sea, to the Mediterranean. So was I exaggerating? I don't know. This is how Pelican did it also last year. They broke through the border, they assumed tropical identity, and they went to Srpski across the border, and this is the moment crossing the border, enjoying the Serbian regatta, and then they went back together to, and this absolute chat, we did it on the board even. So this is the tropical identity I'm talking about. Last slide. On top of all of this, I realized that Timisoara has even more basis for tropical sunset-oriented identity. I realized the solar disk, the yearly disk of whatever, of sun that pass across the sky. When you put the center of the disk on Piazza Umiri, the center is this square, turns out that on the winter solstice, December 22nd, the shortest day of the year, the sun sets directly on the canal, on the Bay Canal. Now, from the point of view of Piazza Umiri, that's the red circle. That means the sun never sets in Timisoara before it crosses the water. Therefore, another argument for sunset-oriented identity and urban planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander. It was a very powerful presentation. Now I introduce our last speaker, Francesco Dell'Innocenti. Francesco Dell'Innocenti is an architectural researcher with a past advertising and engineering, and an expert on architecture biennials. When he is not advising one of these events around the world, his research explores the crossroads of design, technology, and media. The results often shapeshift to achieve maximum impact, from books to commercials, from interactive documentaries to installations. So please, Francesco.
Thank you. Hello. Colas, boobs, and my dad. Three things I'm looking for. Don't be too literal. It's like I will try to explain. I hope by the end of this short presentation, you will understand what I mean. There are three kind of metaphors. Three things I look for, of course, especially in architectural research, because I am an architectural researcher, although not in the academic sense. One of my focuses is architecture biennials. That's also how I have been involved in Beta before, or also Beta this year. I've been scrutinizing these strange, unconventional format that happens every 2 years and doesn't mean anything but that. It can be a festival, it can be a presentation, it can be an exhibition, or it can be really even something different, just it has to happen every 2 years. And I've been scrutinizing many around the world, so much so that I know basically how they function, I know how they operate, and also I know how they cheat in some cases. But this is not the only reason why, of what I do basically. I am also an editor in Volume. The research that you saw before was a research we did for Volume together with the team that I was leading on architecture biennials. And if you understand, Volume is an architecture magazine that is rather unconventional in the publishing world because we don't publish projects. This was actually the foundational mission of Volume in 2005, and you understand that there is a stronger relation to architectural research rather than than publishing buildings, the moment you know the founders. One of the founders is basically this guy on the right, the guy that never smiles. This is a project that will be soon released that I directed. Colas, of course, is a strange architect because he's an architect that actually became famous first for his writings and then for his buildings. So kind of a strange architect. Not many of you know probably that his past was in journalism. Also, he doesn't smile here. Never did, I think. But his beginnings actually were in journalism at this small Dutch magazine, which was a very strange magazine, was quite experimental in its shape. We're talking about the mid-60s, you can imagine already the type of tone of voice. Why I'm talking about this is because if you know his origin story, you can understand also the origin story of everything that came from his mind. He was sharing, actually, the desk with these other men. Colas was in his 20s, Armando was more or less 15 years older. And Armando was a rather interesting character that had an incredible influence over the life of Colas. He actually was constantly picking on Colas. You can imagine the hierarchy between a person that is a little bit older, a little bit more experienced, with somebody that is instead ambitious, but doesn't have much skin in the game yet. So Armando was a boxer as well. And Colas says that actually Armando, with one sentence, really shaped his way to understand both architectural research and also writing. And he was saying actually this: with every sentence, you need to deliver a punch. Every sentence needs to have the power to actually make an impact on whoever reads it. And this was very fascinating because you can see that actually the moment you contextualize it in the historical moment of the 60s, this was actually the same language that advertising was starting to develop. In the 60s, when you know the precise moment, most of Western democracies were opening up to television, and through television was coming a completely different way to deliver a message. Now this is curiously my mom. She is actually, she worked in advertising for her whole life. And you can imagine that we were a very strange type of family. Usually families, when they're watching television all together, there are the commercials, you change. Okay, we were the strange family that were switching to the commercials. We were actually very, so I grew intrigued of this type of messaging, of this type of language. And that's why I also worked in advertising throughout my my late high school and then during university years. So I became rather curious and familiar with the language, but I never understood what every sentence a punch means until actually I saw a lecture that I often bring up. It was a lecture from a guy that was one of the creatives behind the famous 1984 Apple commercial. Probably some of you have seen it, it's still really incredibly relevant today. And this guy came from New York, in front of an auditorium more or less like this, literally craving for knowledge. And this guy, this was the name of the lecture that he was giving. So very clever also, Alexander. Because curiously enough, he arrived on stage, he said, "Hello, my name is this. That's the name of the lecture. Does sex sell? Yes. Goodbye." He jumped on a plane, went back to New York. Didn't say anything at all. That was it. Now, sometimes we can focus on the yes, and we can be moralizing and say like, oh, is it good, is it bad? That's not the point. That's not the point I'm trying to make. As you can see, this is literally yesterday in Venice. And you can see that actually this sex cell type of trick is being used even by the biggest institutions in the arts world. So, does sex sell? Yes. Well, that's what it is. But the interesting thing is the goodbye for me. Because the goodbye meant that the moment you have a good message that is strong enough, drop it there. Leave it for the audience to interpret it. You don't need to say too much. You don't need to beat around the bush. This was the interesting moment in which I realized, actually, that sometimes synthesis is key. Synthesis and confidence, of course. So, going back to the three things that I'm looking for, this is one of the things that I'm looking for, also that we were looking for, I think, when we were reading the texts. The second, we go back for a second to Armando. Armando was not only a writer and a boxer, but he was also an artist. And he wrote a manifesto which actually is foundational in the way Colas sees what to research and how to research it. We can, I think actually, I'll read it out loud because it makes you understand enough. So, not moralizing or interpreting the reality, but intensifying it. Starting point and uncompromising acceptance of reality. Working method, isolating, annexing. Thus, authenticity. Not of the maker, but of the information. The architect who is no longer an artist. No, the artist who is no longer an artist, but a cold, rational eye. You can understand already the type of ambition of any type of investigation that Colas explored, whether in a written form or in an architectural form. And this is the most important point probably that I want to make today, because I see that many of you are young, and many of you will at a certain point probably say they do architectural research, or they're trying to do architectural research. Please, learn from journalism. Journalism teaches the suspension of judgment for the entire time of the research. You don't start from the conclusion. Far too often I see architectural research that starts from what you want to prove and then it's a case for it. Please, do it the other way around. Otherwise, it's absolutely useless. That's what I mean. Perspective. You need to gain perspective throughout the investigation. And then, of course, the third thing that I'm looking for is I mean, I couldn't put my mom without putting my dad. Otherwise, we wouldn't be equal. But why I'm saying this is that because I literally 3 weeks ago, I never see them. I see them once, twice a year. But I saw my dad, and he told me something very, very fascinating. He was like, "How you doing?" "Yeah, I'm very bored because now I don't have, like, I finished a book." A book? I didn't know my dad was writing at all. I knew that he was reading a lot, but I never knew that he was writing. And so what I learned was that for years, he's been collecting my mom's stories. My mom comes from a very rural, small, backward-looking part of Italy, where an anthropologist in the 50s, when my mom was born, found a village that was so retrograde that didn't know the use of the mirror. This is, like, they didn't know, like Egyptians had mirrors. To make you understand how absolutely out of this world my mom's place could be. My dad instead was coming from a city. And basically, the interesting thing, he collected all the stories of my mom, which for him were completely crazy. And he collected them and he wrote them down over years, 5 generations, 300 pages. It's really a strange novel about the city versus the countryside in the economic boom of the 50s, 60s, 70s. Incredible. The patriarchy, the level of patriarchy of my mom's family was something unthinkable, contrary to against the freedom of the 60s. But the interesting thing is that he didn't tell anyone. He didn't tell absolutely anybody. What I mean is, he did it for himself. He did it because he had the urgency to do it. And this is the third point that I'm trying to make. He did it because, not because there was the possibility of a publication, not because there was anything like that. He did it because he felt like doing it for himself. And he didn't tell anyone. But so, these are the 3 points I want to make. I don't want to be too long. Me and also the other people in the jury, we were kind of thinking like, okay, what should we say? I don't know. We really didn't know how to approach basically these 15 minutes that were given to us. So my point was, I was trying to reflect actually on the topic of the biennial. And also on the type of event. I was here, of course, also during the opening. And I was thinking, what could I say? And I thought I will do a small lecture that I could only do in Timisoara. This type of lecture, I couldn't do it in any other biennial. I couldn't put my mom and my dad on screen. I had to be different. But why? Why can I do it here? It is because I think, and you will see, if you haven't seen yet the Garrison, you will see that I think the unicity of this year's biennial is that Alexandra, Oana, and the entire team managed to build literally a stage for a level of tenderness, openness, and literally softness that made me think, you know what? I'm going to put my parents up. Why? Because I never tell them that I love them, like probably most of you. And in this context, I feel confident enough to say it. So that's why I think that it was the most fitting type of lecture. I've told Alexandra, like, the Beta Biennial that is there is the only biennial, and I've seen a million, where I cried. So that's with family. That's it. So this is the point I want to make. And then just closing is that literally the dream of any editor is to be rendered useless. Not to be doing anything. You're reading and you go like, meh, rock and roll, good enough, publish. So we talked about confidence, we talked about everything else, perspective and urgency. And I have to say, the winner of this beta has the 3 of them.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Francesco. Now we'll have a 5 minutes break to arrange for the next part of the evening, when we will discuss with all 3 jurors. So please remain here for the next 5 minutes. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now we'll have a little part of discussions with the jury members. And I would like to start this conversation with a simple but more complicated question, which Anna Maria already somehow underlined in her presentation. Why is it important to write about architecture now? And why should architects write today? And one more part, who should they address? Who should be the readers? The architectural bubble or the general public? Or who should enjoy the architectural written pieces?
Let's start discuss because it is something, what something happened. Why is it is clear? No, it's impossible. But generally there is an echo. Yeah. And I asked myself this question too, and not with total conviction, because I always love literature, and that's why writing appealed to me. So I presume that all people, they feel like this. It was not about architecture, it was about literature in general. So writing, in my opinion, was a very important artistic production of people and artistic experience of people. When I came, so this was, let's say, the background, my personal background. But when I came, I entered the school, there were a lot of persons considering that the architects had only to draw, never to write. As we are close to the university, one of the professors in the school said, if you want to write, go to the university. So it was for the first time that for me the contradiction with writing appeared. Well, in fact, after years and studies, and I understood the conflict between theory and practice, and the tradition of this contradiction, etc., etc. But what I really found, and it is not original, because these things was probably discussed many times by the historians, but in my opinion, writing in architecture was the instrument, the main tool to raise the status of art, the social status of art, of the architect. Because when the architect finally separated from the artisans, or the ones who built with their hand, and architecture was claimed by Alberti, your Florentine, by Alberti, to be a liberal art, not a mechanical art. It was due to writing. And as I told you, I have a sort of sentimental adventure with Vitruviu, a person I hated when I was a student. He seemed to me completely chaotic. And finally I fell in love with him, let's say 20 years ago, because I discovered another Vitruvius. So, in fact, Vitruvius' book was meant to do this, to be written, to be read to the emperor and to some other persons could be promoters, and to raise the status of the architect. And in fact, it is what happened in Italy, and it is interesting that because at the time, almost the good architects, they used to write. And it happened in France too, when this writing was also the main tool to separate from the
Guild.
Sorry?
Guild.
The guilds, thank you, to separate the builders of the builders guild. So it happened till the modern times. It does not happen today. There are good architects who write, but it does not happen like this. For instance, Koolhaas, in my opinion, is one of the architects who writes very well and is extremely interesting. But tell me other, let's say, really important book to have, to be really interesting and innovative and written by an important architect.
Just quickly, I think, let's go back to Vitruvius for a second. What were the three things? Were Firmitas, Venustas, and what was the other one? Utilitas. Okay. But what did he do? He put them in a book. So communicabilitas was equally important, has always been equally important for the architectural profession.
That's what he did, in fact.
In fact, he did that, and that's why he is known. Now, you were asking, why should we write? And this question, I don't know. Because for some people, the communicabilitas is inflected into the form of the written word. For some other people, especially given the fact that the media sphere is changing radically, it might be differently. I simply want to say, if you don't know how to write, start from what you wouldn't want to read. That is a fantastic way to break the white paper void. Because rather than trying to write like somebody else, rather than trying to write something para-academic that is repulsive for a person like me that has to read it, please, do it for me. Don't do it. Do what you would want to read. Be more personal, try to find a different form. Or in general, communicabilitas for me is format agnostic. It shouldn't be only writing, or it shouldn't be only image. It can be, in the last 15 years we saw, it can be diagrammatic. It can be a million different ways. Go and experiment.
But don't you think that people communicate too much and pointless today?
Probably. And at the same time, I also think that Koolhaas, unfortunately, being a very good and very precise writer, created a school of adepts that are horrible at what he's doing very well. So, should you write? Maybe. Should you communicate? Absolutely.
Well, they should communicate, but in general, for me, to communicate means to have something meaningful to communicate. And in my opinion, there is an exaggeration today, a terrible exaggeration. And that's why a lot of people, they communicate, but they have nothing to communicate, but they write books. And this is what? I don't
Do it
know.
for the trees.
People, they
Save the trees.
Address
What do you think?
Alexander, what do you think?
What do I think? Maybe it's good that architects don't have a formal education in writing, because then when they end up writing eventually, then you can see such a big variety of personal styles in writing and trying to communicate. That advice might have been suppressed or molded earlier at the university if they were required to write. And I think we saw here in this submitted work selection a crazy variety of different types of texts and how people express themselves. But I'm trying to think, when I was studying architecture, we were required to write, I mean, to explain the concept of the project. It's just that we were not corrected by the teacher if writing was not good, but I was definitely trained. I had to write, especially in high school, writing about literature, maybe that's what helped. But for me, formatively, now when I think about it, reading magazines and journalists when I was young, the music magazines, rock magazines when I was a teenager, this is where I learned how to write. But by reading and by finding those articles fascinating, and I don't know, I just soaked it up, I guess, by osmosis, and somehow I started also writing in a way that people seem to like. So yeah, read magazines. That's my advice.
Thank you. I would like to go back a bit to something that you already mentioned about the submitted works that were for the competition. I would be really interested to see your opinion about the theme, about Cover Me Softly. How does it feel from your point of view regarding the essays? How do you feel that people approached it? It was a huge variety. But do you think there were more ways of approaching it? Do you think there is a certain way that we should treat covers in general to inspire us for what we should write?
Well, because I'm closer. Well, if you can stand a critique, in my opinion, Cover Me Softly, it's something so large that a lot of things could enter here. On the other hand, maybe this was the idea, to have a larger variety, I don't know, but it is something very few and, well, poetic, nice, not really something to invite directly to certain directions, in my opinion. But it doesn't matter, no matter the title of an event, you can find a lot of ideas, meaningful ideas to be presented, to be written, to be put into projects, some interpretations, etc. And finally, this was the aim of the Biennale, in my opinion. It was, let's say, more vague, or vaguer, probably, this is than the one with housing, for instance, the one to 2018, which is very precise somehow, and very clear. But it is a possibility. In fact, you can have a lot of things. And I think that the people with, who submitted abstracts, they approach the thing from many directions. Some of them, let's say, more direct, some other more oblique, but however. So, well, it's difficult to say that the theme was covered, really.
I think some people, also for you to understand, we had more than 20 abstracts. Some were focused very precisely on covering as an act, so really on the technical aspects of an architecture envelope, which was of course one way to interpret it. Some other ones were instead focusing more on the aspect of the softly, so very personal abstracts, talking about the moment in which architecture, the emotional moment in which they realize something about architecture. Some others instead were almost journalistic in their coverage. So I think the beauty was for us really to have almost like a full portfolio of ways to interpret the theme and the curatorial topic, and at the same time it created us a bit of debate, internal debate, trying to understand, okay, how can we compare? We had poetry, for instance. Poetry was submitted.
Which was very nice.
Yes,
The
indeed.
discussions we had.
That's why I think the discussions were all fairly enriching, I think.
Initially I was not sure if a slogan, "Color Me Softly," can be enough of a prompt for architectural writing. For essays, I had a feeling that there needed to be more of direction of what the curator and what the Biennale wanted people to write about, because then we got mixed results. Some people, I think, kind of used the opportunity of having such a broad slogan to write about anything, and they could easily include it into the topic, while others really put an effort to answer, to try to deconstruct what does the covering mean for me. So maybe it wasn't fair towards that kind of people. That also these people were valued equally, who just wrote about what they would write anyway, and just figure out covers it. But maybe this is not such an important criticism, because in the end the results were still really, really good. So yeah.
It was very nice to have this variety and to discuss around this variety of approaches. I enjoyed it very much with you. Maybe your exuberance in general was really very pleasant.
No, especially because as you've seen from the three presentations here, I think we have probably three different but integral ways to understand architectural writing. So we could cover a lot of territory also in the discussion. Because probably, although our starting point is always, the three of us is different, at the same time we have the elasticity of mind to imagine the other person's starting point and to understand actually and evaluate in that direction a text or an abstract. So that's.
Before continuing, I would like to ask the public if there are any questions. No? Nothing? Yes, please.
Okay. First of all, thank you so much for being in the jury. It was a fantastic joy to have you. And for us as organizers, it is always a challenge to think how can we create a group of jurors, what would be the chemistry in the group. And I think it was, we are very happy with what happened. As you may know, since we are now in the 5th edition, we are trying always to analyze a little bit the format we do in these beta awards. It used to be, we used to ask directly for essays, and then we changed it to abstracts to have different faces, which I think it's a very good choice. But now for this edition, we were thinking, how can we address the topic with ChatGPT and the authenticity of writing, since it is there now and we can use it freely, and how could the jury know or might not know if the author or the writing is real or not. And yeah, probably in the other sections it's not the case, but in text is something very important to address maybe. Of course it has a lot to do with the responsibility of the author, but then again, yeah, I just wanted to know your opinion on that. And yeah, maybe that's the first question. The other I will ask you afterwards.
I'd like to complete something concerning what I said before of the title of the Governing Softly. I imagine that you discuss for choosing the title of the biennial. You discuss a lot in a group, and it's somehow similar with our discussions concerning the title, the theme of the next volume, CETA volume, because it is a thematic magazine and annual, and so we have a lot of discussions. And, well, sometimes we are happy after this, sometimes we aren't. Because one of the, to give you an example, one of the titles we considered extremely well chosen and tricky, and it was Indigenous Aliens. And it was about people who were architects, in general, who were who opened new ways in their country, ways that were not accepted really by the others, or on the contrary, people which came from abroad and they became indigenous somehow. Well, probably nobody understood this thing, because this was the volume. We had the more reduced number of abstracts. Generally, we go to about 50, 60, 80 abstracts per volume. And we had only 20 for this. So sometimes the ideas you have and you go to the idea and it's very nice are not so. It was not really a critique. It was, I understand this. This was I wanted to say only that it was a very large or a very accepted title. I don't want to be misunderstood, because I liked it and I loved it. It was almost present.
Yeah, indeed. There is sometimes the over sophistication of a title becomes very well. It works against you.
Yes.
I think that regarding what you, Alexander, said, is when we were now analyzing and judging the final texts, actually one aspect, I don't want to give away too much, but no, I don't give away. I just say that, for instance, at a certain point, one of the judgment that I gave to one of the, for instance, to one of the texts was, it doesn't say anything, but it was unapologetically Serbian. Because I was saying basically, the final judgment for me was definitely not ChatGPT. And they asked, like, what do you mean by that? My point was unapologetically Serbian. Any AI would have used articles correctly. So, in a way, as an editor, you are learning also to decipher, in this moment, the mistakes as spontaneous and actually coming from a real person. So I'm trying to basically flip the script and say something unexpected, but it is, of course, coming down to the responsibility of the person. And at the same time, yes, it can be, I think, I am not necessarily against it, because I simply say that very often to have a first draft that you really hate is a good starting point.
There was one more question from the party. There was someone, but okay. Next, I would like to discuss about this more, let's say, emotional part of the writing, because somehow taking part to your judging sessions, you were more, this is what my presentation was, that you were more attracted to the academical or editorial ones, and somehow you treated the emotional ones with a more, let's say, critical eye.
I think I'm not right.
Yes.
We didn't do this. And in fact, sometimes it happens that emotional, that's more emotional writings, they could be less structured or less coherent. It happens. But it was not the case. If I remember well, today even we thought when we discussed about one of the papers not having any passion. On the contrary, being too cold and dispassionate somehow. No, you are not right.
What
It happens. Well, what do you think?
Where I want.
Yes?
Yes, okay. Where I wanted to go, it was the fact that do you think that an emotional text coming from the heart with passion can be more powerful than an academic one?
For me, yes. Of course, it is difficult to compare, but this is very important for the writing to be communicated. At the same time, it was a manner to communicate, which is better and stronger than the simple academic writing. I think so. I think you must want something. Your 3 points were extraordinary there, and this urgency, this need to write, I think it's very important, and this is passion, this is emotional.
During the judging, when we were deciding upon the selection, we identified the body of abstracts as category of emotional texts. So that's what you mean, and we selected maybe only 1 or 2 of those. But the problem with, if you decide to, those were more or less personal stories. The problem with that is when you decide to write in that register is that you are 1 foot already into literature, and literature has its own set of rules, what makes a story interesting and what it needs to deliver, and the dramatic arch and punchline. And yeah, some people did not take that into account, so it was really sad to see somebody put their passion and heart into a personal story that is boring. I'm sorry, but yeah, this is a tricky thing to decide on, and then when you disqualify somebody's personal story, you feel a little bit guilty and evil, but this is the problem for majority.
I will ask once again if there are any more questions in the public. Otherwise, I think we will end our discussion here for tonight. I would like to thank you again for joining the team. Oh, you have a question.
Yeah, just because the occasion. So just the occasion seems so fantastic to miss, but on the relation between writing and buildings, I was reading a couple of years ago the book The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and you may be familiar with the book by Victor Hugo. It's about medieval Paris and so on. And you know, it's a beautiful story. I was reading throughout, and at one point I get to this chapter titled "This Will Kill That." Yes. And the chapter is practically the priest from Notre Dame explaining to one of his, colleagues the fact that the edifice will be completely destroyed by the book. These were two forces that were completely impossible to bring together. So, you know, like the Archbishop of Notre Dame just goes through this 20-page explanation of the fact that the book is so much more resistant than the building, and that the book, which was practically barely appearing in the time of the story, which was practically medieval Paris, you know. So you had the printing press appearing, and the book will render the edifice obsolete and practically killing architecture because it's more resistant, it could be disseminated, so this, you know, role of architecture to preserve information and culture would be completely vaporized by the book. And so I was fascinated by that. I'm not sure if it's true or not, but I was just thinking that on the other hand, I constantly read this expression, bridging theory and practice. And I'm always doubtful about it because it seems that theory and practice should not be bridged. On the contrary, they should remain distinct and somehow in conflict. I don't know, maybe if you like, maybe you can comment a little bit on this idea. Did the book actually erode our material culture? Did it create a built world that is more based on instructions somehow? So then material becomes secondary or not? What do you think? Maybe just remains a funny story.
I don't know why I picked up the mic because I don't have anything precise to say other than everything of what you said. I think what it was like from I haven't read the book, but from what you're talking about, it seems to be anyway part of a debate that talks about the relation, the ever existing tension between the material aspect of communication and its relation to the medium with which it communicates, which is anyway something that I think over the last 30 years has been constantly questioned and reformatted and reboxed and reframed, and it hasn't been yet found, let's say, a static answer. So in a way, I frame it as a much longer type of conversation and debate that will probably keep going
as the as the media continue to update and relate to market dynamics, demand, new innovations, or new ways to put out urgent matters. I
remember now, it's a very interesting topic, but I remember now, I don't remember the quotation totally, but it was by Wittgenstein, who built and designed his own house in Wien, and he said that nothing his philosophy was so serious and so important than building his house. So it is the contrary, the opposite idea. That architecture is very difficult. Somehow, I don't say that, I don't want to say that writing is not difficult, because it is difficult. I write with difficulty, for instance. I have to work, to revise, to read, but finally, making a building, designing and making it and putting all things together and be attentive if the building is well done finally and supervise the building site. It's harder.
If you have a very messy mind, making order in a messy mind is probably as hard as actually building a building. But
all I know, all I know that is that when I'm tired at the end of the day, in the evening, so mentally spent, I can still design. I cannot write when I'm tired. So mentally, for me, that's.
I hope I will not, let's say, uncover myself with this question. When I received mail for the next phase after the abstract, there was a list of Schwerpunkte, of points of suggestions. So. And one of them was something, a few were of technical aspect, but one was very intriguing for me, and this was relevance. And my question is, how can we be sure, or how do we know, or how can we write something that is relevant? And how can we define relevance in an architectural text or subject?
Very abstract.
It's impossible to answer.
Yes, and I think actually, for instance, I can tell you, it is very difficult, and in this case, I don't remember actually. No, not me neither. But I can tell you, like, relevance shouldn't be necessarily a way to read what is happening around you and follow it. I can tell you how the entire research on biennials started. In one of the many openings, there is always somebody that basically looks around with his free drink, and to sound intelligent to the people around him or her, will say, do we need another architecture biennial? There is always somebody that is going to say this. Now, it is a fair question. The thing is, at the same time, if there is a proliferation of these type of events, probably if you have to ask yourself the same question a second time, you're an idiot, because you haven't done your job. You just want to look intelligent, but you're not really. This is a way, like understanding that the question is on point, but the market dynamics are pointing to the other position. So understanding the distance between an instinctive point of view and in this case, let's call it the reality, this distance probably is, you could call relevance. The distance between something that you don't instinctively understand and a world that is moving in a different direction. Talking about that, researching about that, and later writing about that, this I find relevant.
Thank you.
If there aren't any other questions from the public, we would like to end the discussion here. I would like to thank you very much, Anna Maria Zahariade, Francesco Dell'Innocenti, and Alexander Bede for joining us tonight and for being part of the jury. And I think we should applaud them. Also, we are continuing our evening at the Garrison. There is a party there starting at 9 o'clock with one of the members of the jury of the Build Space, called Christian Corbin. So we are waiting for you there. See you later.